Happy Monday. Today I've got something a little bit different that I'm super duper excited to share with you. So probably about 25 years ago, crazy, my family took this road trip across the entire United States. It was this crazy thing, but along this road trip, my mom and I stopped at a quilt shop and I fell in love with this rag quilt. So long story short, my mom ends up making me my first rag quilt 25 years ago. I need to go find it and share a picture of it, but it's like fluorescent pink and green and orange, just so bright and crazy, which I love. But anyways, I love that quilt and I've used it for years and years and years and just cherished that quilt. There's something special about those types of quilts, but I've always wanted to make maybe a more updated, a little bit more modern version, and one that I could make on my Longarm. So today I'm going to be sharing my full process of making this awesome rag quilt on the Longarm. And I use the Art Gallery fabrics for this, the Art Gallery Pure. They're so soft. So this quilt, I've only washed it one time so far, and I know the more and more I wash it, the softer it's going to get. Anyway, so I have created a free pattern. You will share the link here. You can grab that on our website, pieceandquilt.com, which it includes all the materials and supplies. Plus, even though in today's video I'm going to be showing you how I make this and quilt it on my Longarm, I've also included instructions in the piecing pattern on how to make it if you're working on a sit-down machine. I also even attached my binding to the top of this quilt on the Longarm as I was quilting it, and I'll share a little bit of that as I'm walking you through my process. So I hope that today you'll find a bit of inspiration from my crazy machine quilting. Before I begin any machine quilting, there's a little prep work I need to do on the backing, the background fabric, and also the raw edge blocks fabric. First, make sure you download the piecing pattern from our website and follow the cutting and preparation instructions outlined there. Once your fabric prep is complete, then it's time to mark the grid on your background fabric. I'm using the blue Mark Be Gone marker and drawing a 6-inch grid, starting from the center of the fabric and working outward. Your grid should end up with 11 vertical lines and 12 horizontal lines. Be sure to check the piecing pattern for illustrations to guide you on the layout. Next, it's time to cut your fabric squares. You're going to be layering 3.5-inch squares on top of 4.5-inch squares. Refer to the piecing pattern again for the detailed cutting instructions. Before cutting your fabrics, I recommend starching them with the Faultless Heavy Starch. I like to starch the back side of the fabric, flip it over, and then press it on the top side. I'll give each piece a couple of rounds of starching to give it a nice crisp feel. And here's a little tip. I actually lay a beach towel over my ironing board when I do this. It helps absorb all the extra moisture and the starch. If you've used a lot of starch, you know exactly what I mean. So in these photos that you can see here in videos, I have already cut my fabrics, those squares. Honestly, I do suggest starching before cutting them, but I am making this whole entire quilt from my stash, so basically it's free, right? But anyways, I actually had these squares already cut. They were leftovers from another project, so I'm just starching the squares. All right, let's talk about layering. If you're working on a sit-down machine, you're going to want to layer and baste your quilt sandwich next. Backing fabric, batting. I'm using 1 layer of the Quilters Dream Blend for that extra crinkly look after washing, and your marked background fabric on the top. If you're quilting on a Longarm, you'll load the quilt backing, batting, and mark quilt top onto your frame. I prefer to baste as I go, starting along the top edge, then down the sides as I advance through the quilt. All right, so now it's time to make the quilt. And this might be a little bit crazy, but I have already gone through and starched out all of my squares. And now it's time to actually attach them to the quilt top and quilt them. So once they're starched, they're gonna be a little bit stiff, which I like because for this type of applique, I want it to kind of hold its shape just a little bit. The next thing that I'm going to do is use some of this Elmer's school glue. I love it. It's washable, non-toxic, all the good things, but the purple, it just seems to kind of glide on the fabric really nicely too, and I feel like I don't get a lot of like gunky buildup when I use it. So I'll add just a little bit of glue to the back of my block. Now this block right here is one of the 4.5-inch blocks. We do have the piecing pattern for this pattern available on our website that includes all the fabric requirements. Okay, so I've got that right where I want it to be, and you could go through and glue all of your squares in place first before you start quilting them, or you can do them one at a time. Right now I'm going to show you one at a time. Okay, so I've got the pink one on first. Now I'm going to use a smaller brown 3.5-inch block. I'll bring that back over here. I'm going to add some glue to the back of it, and just a little bit. You don't need tons of that glue. Glue my fingers down. Anyways, okay, so I'm going to now line that one up right there on the center. Perfect, I love it. Okay, so at this point, you could do one of two things. You could do ruler quilting or hand-guided quilting. I'm going to start out by doing ruler quilting, and I'm going to be adding an echo all the way around here. So I am using my Gammill 22-inch machine. I do have my ruler base here on my machine. This is the ruler foot. Now I'll travel across that line that I've marked using the blue Mark Be Gone marker, and you'll see I'll just kind of hold my fabric down, just making sure that I don't push it up or anything with the foot as I travel onto it. Okay, so I'm going to travel onto it about 1/4 inch. How do I know what 1/4 inch is? Well, the ruler foot here from the needle position to the outside of the foot measures 1/4 inch. So I'm traveling into the point where the side of my foot is right about at the edge of my block. Now I'll engage my machine, and I'm going to just stitch a stitch all the way around. This is not perfect because I want it to be a little bit more, you know, soft and antique-y and, you know, really crinkly, I guess is like the word I want when it's done. I'm okay if it's not perfect. Anyway, so I'll engage the machine, stitch my first line. To get that crisp corner though, I will stop, make the machine take a stitch in the corner, and then continue on. You can see I wasn't perfect there, a little wonky, that's okay. And you'll often notice too, I will be using my hand just as a guide. Also to help keep things just stabilized. Okay, so now I'm going to travel to the center block, and I'll travel in the same distance. I'll stitch again that echo or straight line, that box all the way around the outside. Okay, once I get back to where I started, this is where I will use my mini 4-in-1 machine quilting ruler, and you can pick up the ruler on our website, pieceandquilt.com. I have added our Piece and Quilt pop socket ruler grip there to the top just to give me something extra to hold on to. But what I'm going to do now, just to stabilize this a little bit more, is create an X through the center. So I'll travel along my original stitch line up here to the corner. Then from there, I'll stitch point to point across the block, across this stitch, up here to this corner. Then I'll come down to back to that ironed point, so the center of the block, and then from there I'll travel over to the next block. And then on the next block, just to create more interest, I'll start with the brown fabric first and then the pink fabric on top. And you can see my fabric's wanting to fold up a little bit there, so just kind of stop if you need to, hold it out. I am okay if it gets like wonky like that, because obviously when I wash it, it's going to get all wonky, but obviously I don't want to create tucks or anything weird. Anyways, so now I'll travel down this side, and I'm just going to travel out to that point. Now I'll move on to the next one, and let's start all over, but this time let's use that brown fabric first. everybody. Okay, so I have made it here to my last row. You can obviously see here on my machine that I do have a little bit more of that grid marked on here, but because I am making my quilt completely from scraps, I only had enough fabric to make it this particular size. I only had enough of these squares. So if you wanted to make it bigger, you could totally use this same concept and keep making it bigger and bigger. But for me, mine is just going to be the 11 by 12 blocks. Anyways, so now I have essentially everything all appliqued. I'm loving the way that it's looking, but how am I going to finish off the quilt? As I've been appliquing these squares on here, creating this raw edge look, I have been stitching all the way around the outside. So down this side, over here on the left side, and also across the top, a line that is 1 inch out from the outside of this. And I think, I've done this one other time, but I think I'm going to go through after I finish stitching that line here across the bottom, and I'm going to attach my binding to this quilt top while it's still here on the long arm. Honestly, I probably should have thought about this and done it as I was going. I think it would have made a little bit more sense, but I'm just going to be doing it now. So let's go ahead. I'll stitch that straight line 1 inch out from the bottom here using the machine quilting ruler, and then I'll go get that binding prepped. So to stitch out this line, I am using the 4-in-1 machine quilting ruler, and I'm using that 1 inch marked line on the ruler as my guide, stitching just along the side of the ruler. When I get down here to this bottom side, I'll stitch far enough so that I'm 1 inch. It looks like I've actually gone about a hair too far, so I'll take a stitch backwards. But now I'll actually hold the ruler back here behind. It's a little bit more awkward back there, but I'll line up that 1 inch marked line and I'll just quilt all the way across this bottom edge. Okay, I love that. So I'm gonna go prep that binding and then I'll get it attached. I do have another full video here where I show that process when I've done the binding on the long arm before. I'll add a link to that, so make sure you do check that out, but I'll be back soon once I get that attached. Okay, so I've got the binding all attached. I did it here on the long arm, and it actually went a lot better than the first time when I did it. Like I mentioned a minute ago, if I do it again, I should definitely attach it as I'm going. And you can see I do have all that extra space around here. That was kind of intentional. I knew I was going to be trimming the quilt down. So let's roll down through the bottom. I just prefer to remove my quilts from that bottom edge first. So let's roll down here to the bottom. Also gives me another chance just to kind of look through the quilt and make sure everything looks like I want it. Now I should mention, I did not float this quilt top. I had already unpinned that before I went through and attached the binding. A couple other funny things about this quilt. I have been fighting with myself this whole entire time. I really wanted to create this simple. I want it to be just really crinkly once it's washed, but it has been my personal challenge to not go through and add a filler to all of this area. I love heavy machine quilting, so going a little bit more simplistic is actually a little bit hard for me. There's even an area on one of the sides where I practiced doing some stipple because I was trying to talk myself into stippling. I ended up going on a walk last night to talk myself out of stippling the background. So if I can complete the binding and wash this quilt without adding any more quilting, I'm gonna be real proud, so stay tuned for that. But I'm loving it. The more it's coming together, the more like, okay, my vision, because there was definitely a couple of times when I was a little worried if I was being insane. It brings back so many memories. My mom made me a rag quilt 25 years ago, and I feel like it was always one of my favorite quilts. It's just so bright and crazy and fluorescent. I drove a bright blue Volkswagen Beetle at the time, and I think I've just always been inspired and wanted to make a rag style quilt on the Longarm. Today just happened to be that day. Anyway, so I'm going to finish unloading this quilt here off of the machine. Then I'll go and trim all the way around just at the edge of this binding. And then I'm actually going to jump on my regular machine and I'll attach this down by machine. I don't see any reason doing hand because I want it to be kind of that raggedy look. I want it to be washed and loved. So I'll be back in just a few minutes when I get that done. Okay, so I just finished the binding and I love it. It's turning out so cute. So next up, I'm going to go wash it and then we'll know just how cute it really is. I should also say, it's been literally less than 24 hours since I started making this quilt. So literally, it's the perfect gift. Okay, I finished up quilting, washing, binding, all the good things, and I am obsessed with how this quilt turned out. It's just so cute, and best of all, everything in this quilt was from my stash, so it was free, right? Anyways, we do have a free pattern available on our website. If you do want to grab that, we'll include the link below. Make sure you do check that out. Plus, I will be back next Monday with another machine quilting video. And if you didn't know, I do drop exclusive machine quilting videos in the Peace and Quilt Academy every month. So I add 2 new videos every single month. It is packed with inspiration. But for now, I hope you found a little bit of inspiration. I can't wait to see what you do. Before you leave, make sure to hit that subscribe button and I will be back soon.